Great, welcome. My name is Kara Hughes, and I'll be the moderator for the ARPA Funding Bidders Conference. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Barnstable County is pleased to host a bidders conference to share details and answer questions about $5 million in small and medium-sized grants for Cape Cod communities available under the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA. More information about Barnstable County's ARPA program can be found at the following link, which you can see right up here on the screen. We have a great agenda and a Q&A session to follow. Attendees will be able to ask questions via the chat function in this Teams live event only. And people who are calling in, unfortunately, cannot ask via the chat. But if you are not able to ask via the chat, or if you do not get your question answered due to high volume, you can email your questions to arpa@barnstablecounty.org, and it's right on the screen right here. And in addition to that, following the conference, you'll be able to view a list of FAQs on the ARPA website, which is also listed here at capecod.gov. I also wanted to go through quickly some of the Q&A instructions at the top so everyone understands how to put the questions into the chat. As you can see on the slide, please click on the question and answer icon. And there's an example below if you follow the red line. You can all see it. You can type your question into the box and select send. Please include your name and organization in your question. That'll help us to facilitate the questions in a more organized way, and we appreciate that. I also want to outline some important facts about the grant process itself. This is a competitive grant process. Therefore, we will not be able to answer specific questions about your specific grant idea today. We will use information from the session, FAQs posted afterwards, and links to the U.S. Treasury's ARPA information that we will provide to make your decisions. I am pleased now to introduce the ARPA team agenda and presenters here with us today. Beth Alpert, Barnstable County Administrator, will be delivering welcoming remarks. Vera Harik, Barnstable County Assistant Administrator, will be providing an overview of the eligibility for the $5 million in small and medium-sized grants and presenting application steps and timelines. Sean McGoldrick from Clifton Larson Allen, otherwise known as CLA, is the Chief Financial Officer, State and Local Government, and he'll be providing information on project review and grant oversight. I am pleased to introduce Beth Alpert, the Barnstable County Administrator, who will provide us with opening remarks. Beth.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We're happy that you've joined us for this, our first bidders conference. Just a bit of a recap about ARPA funds at Barnstable County. In May of 2021, Barnstable County received a little over $41 million in American Rescue Plan Fund Act from the U.S. Department of Treasury. Barnstable County will use its ARPA funds to respond to COVID-19 public health impact and its negative economic impact, and also by providing funding and investment in critical water and sewer projects and broadband infrastructure. This is a transformational opportunity for Cape Cod, and ARPA funds will benefit the Cape community for years to come. In the spring of 2022, the county allocated $10 million of its funds to the 15 towns on Cape Cod. And to date, we've had 6 applications and 5 have been approved. So 6 applications from the 15 towns have been submitted and 5 have been approved. We're calling that phase 1. What we're here today to talk to you about is phase 2, which is the distribution of $5 million in competitive grants to Cape-based organizations to expand the county's ability to address economic recovery from COVID and support organizations who are providing critical issues focusing on the facing local Cape Cod communities. So the purpose of today's Bidders Conference is to provide you with an overview of ARPA, discuss eligible uses for ARPA projects as defined by the federal government, by the U.S. Treasury, discuss the criteria we're going to be using to evaluate applications, and then provide you with an overview of the application process. So again, thank you very much for joining us. I'm going to turn it back to our moderator, Kara.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth, for that introduction and overview of the process. I would like to introduce Vera Harik, the Barnstable County Assistant Administrator, and she will be providing an overview of eligibility for the $5 million in small and medium-sized grants and present application steps and timeline. Vera.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're very pleased to be here to provide you with this information. We feel it's relevant, and we appreciate your interest in this funding opportunity and in the ARPA grant in general. So I'll be here with you for quite a bit of time now, going through some of the details of this funding round. I'm going to be addressing, stepping back a little bit and addressing what is ARPA in general for people who might not be as close to it as our team is. We're going to then be talking about ARPA and Barnstable County specifically, how much has come into Barnstable County, as our county administrator just alluded to. Then we'll roll our sleeves up and get into a bit an overview of the $5 million small and medium size grant opportunity, which, as Beth said, we're calling funding round 2. We'll go over who's eligible to apply for this funding round, what the application steps are, and what our timeline is for this process. So, American Rescue Plan Act 2021 is also known as the COVID Stimulus Plan, was signed by President Biden on the 11th of March in 2021. It comes on the heels of the CARES Act that was signed under the Trump administration, which provided a great deal of support to individuals and businesses at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. The ARPA Plan Act includes funding to all states, counties, tribal governments, cities and towns to support their response to and recovery from the COVID-19 public health emergency. So what that means to us here is that Barnstable County government has received ARPA funding. All 15 of our individual towns have received ARPA funding in this ARPA, this act, under this act, as well as our Wampanoag tribe and our neighbors in Mashpee have also received direct funding. This funding is under ARPA is intended to fight the pandemic and support families and businesses struggling with its public health and economic impacts. It's also to maintain vital public services, even amid declines in revenue resulting from the crisis, and to build a strong, resilient, and equitable recovery by making investments that support long-term growth and opportunity. So the ARPA legislation identifies basically 6 categories that ARPA funds can be spent within. We've consolidated them to 4 here, and they are the following. As you see here on the slide, you can use ARPA funding to invest in infrastructure projects having to do with water quality, water, sewer, as well as broadband infrastructure. You can use ARPA funding to fund public health system costs associated with a COVID response, other health services, and related capital investment. We can use, in this funding round, we can use ARPA funding to address negative economic impacts of COVID on households, businesses, and nonprofits. Also with an eye toward disproportionately impacted communities. And in this particular bucket, in this section, negative economic impacts, you will find housing and early education and childcare investments. And lastly, you can, recipients of ARPA funding at our level, at the county level, could, if we chose to do so, replace lost public sector revenue. In other words, if we had lost revenue during the COVID pandemic for any reason, or to provide premium pay to employees providing essential work during COVID-19. Excuse me. I have a slash through this here that is, although it's allowed under general ARPA principles, here in Barnstable County, our Board of Commissioners and Assembly of Delegates have taken the decision that the county ARPA funding will not be used to replace lost public sector revenue or premium pay, provide premium pay. So public sector revenue and premium pay are off the table for county ARPA projects at this time. There are two dates that we working in ARPA continually must remain aware of, and you as potential applicants should be aware of them too. And they are December 31st, 2024 and December 31st, did I say 21st in the first one? December 31st, 2024 and December 31st, 2026. By December 31st of 24, we must have decided where all the funds are going. We must have made funding decisions, formal funding decisions obligating the ARPA money. You as potential sub-applicants, let's say you're a successful applicant, are in that same timeline. The implication here is that salaries can't be paid beyond December 31st of 2024. At any level of ARPA, we in the county administration can't pay salaries out of ARPA after 2024. You as a potential sub-grantee, sub-recipient, can't pay salaries out of ARPA past 2024 as well, using ARPA funds. And then December 31st, 2026, all ARPA spending has to be completed. So if you are successfully funded under ARPA, your ARPA project expenditures must be finished by December 31st of 2026. Now, ARPA funds can be used to cover costs incurred from when ARPA was signed, from that point in time forward. So from March 3rd of 2021, if your project has expenses that incurred expenses prior to the approval date, those are apparently allowed under ARPA. So relative to ARPA and Barnstable County, as our county administrator mentioned, county government has received a direct allocation from the U.S. Treasury of $41,370,810. So we round that up to 41.4, or generally speaking, we call it 41 million, just because the entire number is a pretty big mouthful. In addition to that, our 15 towns have collectively received between them slightly more than $26 million. So ARPA collectively has provided over $67 million to Barnstable County, and that's not counting what our neighbors in the Wampanoag tribe have received. There's a link here that indicates where you can find additional information on some of these specific numbers if you are interested in doing so. In April of 2022, our Board of Commissioners for Barnstable County appointed an 8-person ARPA advisory committee to provide recommendations on county priorities for the allocation of these $41 million. This is a big responsibility, and the board has requested some advice and some recommendations from a blue ribbon panel of individuals appointed to do this. And that group is called the Barnstable County ARPA Advisory Committee. So this committee has done its work, continues to do so for another month or so, but has already recommended an allocation of ARPA funds to small, medium, and large project funding rounds. As you are probably aware, today we're talking about the small and medium-sized projects. Large projects, the large project funding round is to come, And that funding round will largely address water quality and housing related projects. Those are large ticket items typically, and deserving of additional focus by the advisory committee for additional recommendations to our Board of Commissioners on those projects. In addition to that, the advisory committee has recommended project selection criteria, which we'll go over now. We'll go over that in a minute. So here's how the money's flowing right now, or has flowed so far. Here's our $41.4 million that we've been allocated directly by the U.S. Treasury to Barnstable County. Our Board of Commissioners has made some preliminary decisions. The round one has been is an allocation to our 15 towns. Of our $41 million, $10 million has been earmarked or allocated for distribution to our 15 towns. And that was done under a specific allocation method that our Assembly of Delegates put forward, determining how much each of the 15 towns will receive. And that information can be found on the ARPA website and the ARPA portal, which we'll direct you to later. As our county administrator mentioned, 6 of our 15 towns have already applied and have been approved for funding, so that about $5.5 million of that $10 million set to flow out to the towns is already approved. So there's we'll need somewhere around $1 million for administrative costs to run this multi-year program here at the county, which leaves about $30.4 million for projects of regional impact. And here's where we find ourselves today. You are here in round 2, and we are discussing the small and medium projects for a total of $5 million. And as I said earlier, future funding rounds will address the large projects for water quality and housing. So the project sizes, what's a small project? What's a medium-sized project from our point of view? A small project is between $100,000 and $250,000, and a medium-sized project is between $250,000 and $500,000. So we're not entertaining project proposals smaller than $100,000 at this time. What we'll suggest is if you have a project that is less than $100,000, that perhaps there are ways that you could find to collaborate within your community with other applicants and find other methods in order to bring your project size up, to scale it up to at least $100,000. Generally speaking, so this round is for projects between $100,000 and $500,000. You don't really need to worry about whether your project is a small size project or a medium sized project at this time. This is just that's the range of projects we're looking for this round. Now it's important to identify and to discuss with you what this funding round is not intended for. So this funding round is not intended to replace lost revenue for municipalities. And I addressed that in a slide earlier. We don't have provisions for addressing revenue replacement for municipalities. This funding round is also not intended to fund lost revenue and expenses for private businesses, private for-profit, and even private nonprofit businesses. This isn't for sort of filling in gaps of funding that you lost during COVID. This is for forward-looking projects intended to serve the public or provide public benefit. Again, as I mentioned, this funding round is not intended to fund premium pay for your staff. So also this funding round is not intended to duplicate direct payments or grants or loans that have already been made available from other federal or state funding sources, such as the CARES Act, or FEMA payments, or the Small Business Administration's Payroll Protection Program, or PPP project. This is not for that. This is not backward-looking revenue replacement purposes. or for forward-looking, just your own private business purposes. Excuse me. Here's what this funding is intended to do. We want to fund projects that will have as much of a regional benefit as possible. We want to fund projects that benefit populations that are disproportionately impacted by the COVID pandemic. This would include persons of color, people of low socioeconomic status, older adults, persons with disabilities, and others who are disproportionately impacted by the COVID pandemic. We also want to fund projects that reduce barriers to healthcare and human services, that reduce barriers to information transfer or access to information, and that reduce barriers to economic opportunity. This is a repeat of a prior slide. To repeat, then we're going to move into project evaluation metrics and selection criteria at this time that the ARPA Advisory Committee put forward. Again, just to review before we go there, the water sewer projects and large housing projects are confined or set aside for the large grant funding round, and thinking is still ongoing in that regard. If you have a project that addresses housing related issues that would be amenable or would fit within the small to medium grant size categories of $100,000 to $500,000, you can certainly apply in this round, and that would also pertain to water and sewer projects. But again, typically these projects are very large ticket items that would be beyond the scope of this funding round. So in terms of selection criteria and programmatic elements, a strong project will be one that meets the selection criteria, and in so doing addresses the related regional challenges, cross-cutting issues, and project outcomes that have come out of our advisory committee's work. And these are they. This is a bit of a, I wanted to show you this slide in its entirety, because this is how all of these particular elements interrelate and fit together. Reading from the bottom, project outcomes with these particular elements will fit into providing measurable outcomes, which is a selection criterion. Cross-cutting issues are also very important in this funding round, and those fit into the criterion that projects shall address cross-cutting issues, and the regional challenges that have been put forth by our Cape Cod Commission's work of water quality, housing, childcare, economic stability, climate change, and infrastructure. We want projects that will meet at least one, if not more, of those regional challenges. That is a very important selection criterion. So that's how all this fits together. Here's the selection criteria themselves. And so this is for your purposes as you're thinking through your project ideas, what you might want to try to pull together in terms of a project and apply for funding for. What we're looking for are projects that, again, address the regional challenges mentioned below, that have a regional or sub-regional benefit. So regional would be the entirety of Barnstable County or Cape Cod. Sub-regional benefit would be upper, middle, lower, or outer Cape, or several towns or communities getting together on a particular problem. So that would be a sub-regional. That would be a sub-regional group of grouping in that regard. So less interested in town-specific projects that only address a finite number, very finite, discrete issues. More interested in regional or sub-regional benefit. We're trying to encourage addressing cross-cutting issues and collaborations among different entities. Again, we want you to address cross-cutting issues that are included here. Again, as I mentioned, barriers to accessing services which would be barriers such as transportation barriers to accessing service, or language barriers, or trying to bridge the digital divide for people who are not technologically savvy or don't have the financial means of accessing technology, or people whose immigration status prevents them from accessing services and maximizing their health and well-being. Other cross-cutting issues are diversity, equity, and inclusion related, and addressing vulnerable populations. We would like people to try and address social determinants of health in their projects. If possible, climate change or adaptation, or at least not have a project that contributes to the degradation of our environment. We would like people whose project ideas use proven concepts and interventions. In other words, are making use of the evidence base, not necessarily looking for new ideas, new models, new ways of doing things, if there are already proven methods out there. However, if there is something highly imaginative or innovative that you want to try, that's definitely something that you would be encouraged to present for. And again, we're interested in interagency, intertown, interorganizational collaborations. That means town to town, different town departments, public-private partnerships, nonprofit organizations, partnering with other nonprofits in the area so as to maximize the sustainability and scale of the work being done and touching as many people as possible. And we would like to see some concrete project outcomes proposed by you. What will be the quantifiable impact of your work, of the project you're putting forward? Will you be able to show any kind of return on investment as well? So again, these are the selection criteria. Sorry, I'm switching around here. These regional challenges, cross-cutting issues, and project outcomes feed upward into these major selection criteria. This is what we're looking for from these small to medium-sized projects. So who's eligible to apply? Well, nonprofit organizations, Cape Cod towns, and related subunits, for example, school districts or water districts, or departments within towns, or councils on aging, or their associated sort of nonprofit entities, friends of, those sorts of organizations. Nonprofit organizations, I'm going to just go jump back to number one. Nonprofit organizations includes fraternal organizations as well. For-profit organizations also eligible to apply here, but again, this is not a funding round intended to support your narrow business model. It is more to encourage outward collaboration and public service. In other words, use this funding in ways to yes, further your business, but also further the public good. So as before, we are encouraging interagency, intertown, sub-regional, public-private partnerships, and collaborations between applicants. So let's go into some of the application steps. It's not going to be as simple as sort of just throwing in an application and waiting to see what we say. We've got some steps here that are intended to make sure that you understand the requirements of the ARPA funding responsibility that you'd be undertaking, and that make sure that we understand where your project's coming from and can identify any sort of duplication of effort or opportunities to encourage collaboration. So in this regard, we have a pre-application process, which we are in right now. So we are at number one right now at the bidders conferences. We're in ours today, and there's another one tomorrow evening, scheduled at 7 p.m. at a time when perhaps people who work during the day, not in public service or not at a nonprofit or similar organization, and who might be have a day job can also participate in this. So tomorrow evening we have another bidders conference just like this one. But here's the meat of this. we are going to ask you, pre-applicants, to submit a letter of intent to us in order to in order for you to move forward in an application process. Letters of intent will be we will be open to receiving letters of intent between 8/24, so early next week, and the end of September, 9/30 of 22. If your letter of intent is accepted by the county, you will then be given access to the online application portal to proceed with your application. So many of you may have heard of the ARPA application portal. It is the system that our 15 towns are using right now in order to apply. We're not going to belabor that issue here because it's just a little bit early in the process. If your letter of intent is accepted, then you will be credentialed to access the application portal, and we will provide you with full information and any technical assistance that you need to do so. So that's down the line. So what to worry about now is the letter of intent and its contents and your thinking about the project you want to submit. After the letters of intent, county staff will review them, and you will then either be credentialed to continue with your the application process and to access the portal, or your letter of intent will not be accepted, and your idea won't be included in this funding round or potential for inclusion. I will say that if you see a star in this presentation, it means that the dates discussed are subject to change at our team's discretion. It's just the nature of things. That we will do everything we can to keep dates stable, but one never knows, and so we do reserve that right. So let's talk about the letter of intent a little more. As I said, all applicants, pre-applicants really now, all of you are now pre-applicants. Pre-applicants must submit a letter of intent to move forward in the process.
I was expecting
Review of letters of intent. We have an open mic. We have an open mic. So if everyone who's not me could mute, that would be good. So pre-applicants must submit a letter of intent to move forward in the process. Review of the letters of intent will allow county staff to assess the likelihood of the project being ARPA eligible. They'll allow us to assess your capacity and willingness to meet audit and reporting requirements set forth by the US Treasury. And they'll allow us to identify potential duplication of effort and opportunities to encourage collaboration among pre-applicants. As I said, we are encouraging these collaborations. Oftentimes they are more efficient for the good of all. Further on the letter of intent, your letters of intent will be submitted via a link and a fillable form on the county's ARPA webpage. This is the link, barnstablecounty.org/ARPA. If you go there, you will find your way to the letter of intent space. I will warn you now that it is not up yet. The letter of intent section of that is not up yet. It will be made live in time for our go date on August 24th. But go to the website, this website, by all means, to familiarize yourself with Barnstable County ARPA and ARPA in general. Details and instructions for the letters of intent will be able to be found at this site on August 24th. Submissions of letters of intent in hard copy or by email may be considered only with prior approval from county staff. Please bear that in mind. All LOIs must be submitted via the link on the web. You must contact us ahead of time if you need, for some reason, to submit your LOI in hard copy or by email. Again, we'll be accepting letters of intent from 8/24/22 through the end of September. And again, we may extend the LOI period at our discretion. Here's what we're looking for in the letter of intent. Again, this will be on the site. We're asking you to submit a budget. There's what are you planning to spend the money on, and how? With some justifications. How did you get to those numbers? We want you to submit a project narrative, and I'll go into that in a minute. Tell us who your project staff are going to be. Who are your key people? Who's going to be running the project? We want to see a project schedule and key milestones and dates. How do you plan to pull this off? What are going to be your milestones, and how are you going to schedule the work in order for it to be accomplished by December 31st of 2026? We're going to want you to attest to your willingness to comply with the application terms and conditions, which will be made available to you. It's a 5-page document that generally says this is really what has to happen in terms of following federal, Treasury guidelines, county guidelines, and sort of grant related activities. We're going to ask you to make sure that you're willing to do that and to attest to that. And we're also, there's some additional items depending on type of organization you're from or you represent. I'll get to later in a later slide. Also, there'll be some additional items depending on your organization type. So here's a little bit more on the project narrative. In the project narrative, just answer these questions. What do you plan to accomplish with this project? What problems have you identified that need to be resolved? How do you plan to do that? What are your expected outcomes of your project? How many people served? What do you intend to accomplish? How many of those things do you intend to accomplish? We want things that are measurable, that you can obtain, you can clearly identify, and that are valid, that your outcomes are valid based on common understanding of project delivery programs and sometimes the evidence base. We want you to identify, tell us what specific benefit your project will provide to Barnstable County residents. So be specific here. So if you reflect upon what we're looking for in these selection criteria and answer these questions about your grant idea, your letter of intent will have the elements we're looking for. Excuse me. We also want you to, how do you plan to use the funds? But reflect the budget that you put together in your project narrative. We'll define how many words or how many pages or anything in the coming days, but we're not going to be asking for war and peace here. This is not the time to pull out all those stops. We'll have something that's long enough for you to get your idea out, but not too long so that everyone is bogged down in the process and not moving forward. Additional elements of the letter of intent, again, additional items by your organization type. If you're a nonprofit organization, we're going to want you to upload a copy of your IRS Form 990, copy of your audited financial statements, and your nonprofit registration form, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Massachusetts Form PC. For for-profit organizations, we want to see 2 to 3 years of federal tax returns, any audited financial statements you might have, and your business registration and/or articles of incorporation. And for other government entities, audited financial statements and/or your single audit report. And so why are we asking for this now? It's because taking this funding is also agreeing to abide by some pretty stringent requirements that have been set forward by the United States Treasury. We need to make sure that our pre-applicants, which is you at this time, working on a letter of intent, have the capacity and the organizational capacity and wherewithal to perform, to understand and to perform under these grant guidelines. So after the letter of intent, so all of that was the letter of intent. Again, just briefly, once your letter of intent is in, our team reviews it between basically the end of September and mid-October. At that point, the ARPA, you will know by October 14th whether your LOI has been accepted and you will be credentialed for accessing the ARPA portal. And I'm not going into those details right now. We'll let you know. However, once that happens, once the LOI is approved and you're credentialed, you'll receive these additional details, and the portal will be open for round 2 applications from October 14th through December 2nd. So that's 7 weeks to upload your application. Now, a lot of the work will already have been done by you during the letter of intent process. So really, it becomes a simple matter of uploading that information with any, obviously, amendments you want to make and so on into the portal. The application portal is very straightforward and simple. It has reviews that take place once the project is uploaded. You don't have to wait to be credentialed in order to take a look at the online portal now. It has a public facing side to it. It shows the different application buckets right now. And we encourage you, you can preview it. We encourage you to familiarize yourselves with the portal's contents, the different funding buckets. There's a lot of information inside each of those clickable funding buckets that talk about the types of projects that are allowed under that funding bucket. For people interested in the childcare, housing, economic related projects, those can be found under the economic button. You'll see what I mean when you get there. So housing, childcare is under the economic button. Again, we encourage you to take a look at the portal and its contents, because doing so may assist you to frame your letter of intent. And that portal is open now. So here's a timeline for the whole process for round 2. Again, the ARPA portal opens to small and medium applications. I have to amend the date here. I do apologize. It's going to be open from under number 1 from 10/14 to December 2nd. So I will make that change. So I'm making you aware that it's an error here. Our accountants who will be speaking with will be providing what we call level 1 and level 2 review. They'll be doing that on a rolling basis from when applications get certified through the point in time in which the county will begin reviewing projects. Bear in mind that although the accounting people are doing things behind the scene to see if your project is eligible or not, county level 3 review won't begin until all the projects are in and those deadlines are met. We will then review everything all at once for fairness sake. And we're not going to be reviewing things on a rolling basis and getting, predetermined notions of what's coming in and what's not. We will have a fresh review at the time that the level 1 and level 2 reviews are concluded. Once county level 3 reviews, county staff review the projects, we'll be making recommendations to our Board of Commissioners for funding based on the project selection criteria that we've discussed previously. And then in the month of April, we are anticipating that our Board of Commissioners will be signing the grant agreements that we recommend, that are recommended for funding. And then checks will be going out thereafter. Now I'm finished with my section of the presentation. And look forward to returning this to our moderator, Kara.
Great. Hi there, everyone. Thank you so much, Vera, for that very informative and detailed presentation. We'll now be moving into the next presenter on our agenda, and I'm happy to introduce Sean McGoldrick of CLA, who will provide information on project application review and grant oversight. He is from Clifton Larson Allen, known as CLA, which is a professional services network and the 8th largest accountancy firm in the United States. As a firm experienced in the ARPA grant, CLA is working across the country with towns, cities, and counties to provide guidance on the funding process. Sean, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you very much, Kara, and thank you, Barnstable County, for allowing me to be part of this presentation today. Good afternoon, everyone. So as previously mentioned, I'm a CFO within our state and local government BizOps group here in Massachusetts. And essentially what our group does, we perform a lot of interim services for state and local governments, whether it's state reporting, special projects, you name it, for municipalities here in the Commonwealth. And over the past year or so, a large part of what we've been doing is grants management in the form of ARPA. So not only are we at a local level connected with ARPA, but as Kara mentioned, nationally. We've been helping review eligibility, helping do reporting for ARPA from small towns all the way up to larger states in counties and cities in between. So essentially what we've been contracted to do with the city is with the county, is to not only construct their ARPA portal site, which Vera included a link above, but also provide an application review. Also do quarterly reporting to the federal government, perform risk assessment and monitoring for their subrecipients. And this is a rigorous process with multiple review stages along the way to ensure ARPA projects are eligible and appropriate based on their category. So we help make that determination for eligibility and as our slide says here for risk assessment. So once that letter of intent is approved and you can enter in your applications into the portal, a member of our team from CLA or perhaps a subcontractor will be contacting you in order to set up a risk assessment. This is required for any subrecipient. Doesn't matter if it was a city, a town, nonprofit, for-profit, you name it. We are not singling anyone out on this call. It is simply if you are a subrecipient of the county, you have to go through a risk assessment. Uniform guidance requires this, and it is a standard in order for those funds to be awarded. And as Vera has here too, and previously mentioned, yes, we will be asking for certain financial documentation, whether it's financial statements, tax returns, making sure that we, the county, have a good assessment in terms of what risk level you may or may not be at in order to award those funds. Because it's something that is very important to communicate, I think, given the role we play, is that there's a lot of risk that goes involved with monitoring and awarding these funds, right? So one of the most critical areas is this review and determinations of subrecipients in this risk assessment process. So ARPA is a once-in-a-lifetime federal program which dispersed billions of dollars throughout the United States, and it's a multi-year grant. These funds will be scrutinized by the federal government, and as the direct recipient of these funds, it's the county's job to be good stewards of these funds and to make sure all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. The county and we here at CLA certainly don't want the feds coming back and trying to claw back funds or have findings on a single audit. So I would say if you aren't prepared to provide such information as previously discussed and as we're about to discuss, then maybe ARPA funding isn't for you. So the general risk assessment, once you submit your first application, it's about a 20 to 30 minute discussion with your group, key financial personnel. We talk about things at a high level, including internal controls, tone at the top, prior grant experience. I know in talking to even some of my smaller communities, some of my smaller cities and towns, they may not get these type of grants in terms of the length, the dollar amount, the reporting you have to do on this. So it's very important to make sure that we understand from the county's perspective, how are you going to be in terms of a risk level, what type of financial software you use. Certainly an automated system is better than the good old manual ledger, right? How the applicant plans to adhere to all these federal grant requirements is important to us. Because as Vera said earlier, there will be a terms and conditions, there will be a grant agreement. We want to make sure that you, the awardee, are willing to follow these guidelines and willing to subject yourself to monitoring. So if the project is approved, subrecipients again must adhere to the federal reporting requirements. So this isn't something that the county came up with in terms of Here's what we want to see. This is from the federal government. So the federal treasury portal requires the county to report on a quarterly basis. Due to their size, the amount of money received, some of our larger communities, whether that's again a state, county, or a metropolitan city, are required to report on a quarterly basis. So what does that mean? That means on a quarterly basis, there's something called a project and expenditure report that the county has to submit. In there, they put all the approved projects, they put project description, dollar amount, certain programmatic data, and again, it's not the county that wants this, it's the federal government. I've been asked from some subrecipients before from some various cities and towns, well, why do you need this information? I don't want or need this information. It's the federal government that wants and needs this information. There's a massive reporting guide out there, which I think we have a link to afterwards. So if you ever want to go and need to get some extra sleep, take a read at that at night, and that'll help you out. So therefore, all of you, a potential subrecipient, must also provide this information to us, the county, on a quarterly basis. And just a couple example questions here. It's how much have you actually spent? So say it's a multi-year grant, a multi-year project, and you've been awarded. We want to know the progress, right? We want to know if you got a 100K award, have you spent 25 grand? Have you spent 50 grand? What percentage of that project is completed? So that we can in turn fill out that same question for the federal government. Next tab here. Thank you. So these are also some helpful, useful links that the county included. I don't want to say they're my Bible, but these are great resources. You can look at the final rule itself, which is 437 pages. I don't want to tell you how many times I've read that because it's just embarrassing at this point. There's also a great overview of the final rule. I believe that's a 44-pager, maybe more people's speed in terms of the major summary and their major provisions of ARPA itself. And also there's final rule FAQs. So I think typically on a monthly basis, the feds will get updated FAQs and we'll put them out there. The good news is this is all available for public consumption, for public reading. Again, having a hard time sleeping at night, feel free to pop open any of these links and these PDFs. I think it's a great resource. Obviously our team internally uses it, but we are here to support the county in any which way possible for ARPA, and including helping them through this process here of subawarding ARPA funds. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean, for your presentation and outlining your role in this process. And thank you to all of our great presenters, Beth and Vera. And we're happy to start the Q&A portion of the Bidders Conference via chat. Again, I just want to go through how to do this because we are having some questions come in and I want to make sure we show the screen again. And I want to also underscore that if we're not able to get to your, answer your questions due to the high volume today, please be sure to email your questions, and the website, the actual email address is right there, arpa@barnstablecounty.org. And then in addition, following the conference, I want to say this again, because we've seen some questions come in about this. You'll be able to get a viewing of a list of FAQs that will respond to some of the questions on the ARPA webpage at capecod.gov. In addition, the deck that you've seen today will be available to all of you to look through and review. I also want to let folks know that you will have the ability to watch this live stream again to walk through, and you can stop it and pause it and really dig in deeper to some of the details that were outlined. So I want to make sure that you're all aware of those pieces in our effort to provide as much information as possible. And I also just want to, do one more reminder that this is a competitive grant process. And during this Q&A, we will not be able to answer specific questions about your own grant idea. And we will again be sharing, the FAQs. We encourage you to go to the U.S. Treasury's ARPA information that both Vera and Sean spoke about, to dig through those for additional questions and to help you, give you more information to make your decisions on how to proceed going forward. We're just gonna, there we go. Okay, we just wanted to flash the, the Q&A instructions one more time so people can add in their questions into the chat. As you can see, the red arrow is there with the question. You type your question in the box, hit send, and please, when possible, include your name and organization in your question. So thank you to those who have put some questions in the chat. We appreciate that, and we encourage others to do so as well. We also received questions ahead of time, which we encourage folks to do who are in attendance today via the ARPA email address. And Vera is pleased to start off the Q&A with some of those questions that were emailed in ahead of time by the attendees here today. So I'm going to let Vera take it away with some of these questions that came in pre-conference, and then we will pivot to the questions that are coming in via the chat. Thank you so much, Vera.
Great, thank you, Kara. I will do my best, and I will be asking my colleague Sean from CLA also to answer any questions that we have that come in. If a question comes in that neither of us feel able to answer, we will simply say, well, we'll get back to you on that, and you will see a response in the frequently asked questions later on. So I'll get us started here. We've had a question come in, which reads as follows: is this funding round available to small local retailers impacted by COVID? And so this is a question that we've received frequently. And I will say, and Sean will also invite you to jump in as well. The answer is this funding round available to small local retailers? The answer is yes. But as stated during the presentation, this funding is not meant to duplicate federal or state assistance already made available in response to the COVID pandemic. In addition, if you look back at the selection criteria that we discussed, you'll see the type of issues that we want projects to address. And I'll also say that for private for-profit entities, we encourage public-private partnerships in this space. Sean, is there anything you would want to add there?
Yeah, Vera, I do just want to add, so under these various expenditure buckets, expenditure categories, which were mentioned earlier in terms of water, sewer, broadband, public health, negative economic impact, there are multiple subcategories under there. So as just a further example, the negative economic impact, there's 42 different subcategories. And it's sort of broken out by different segments, if you will. So is there an assistance to small business section? Yes. There's, I think, 5 or 6 expenditure categories if you want to there. Is there an assistance nonprofit section? Yes, there's a couple expenditure categories under there. And so that's why it's important. It's not a catch-all. It's not a one-for-one. So as Kara and Vera mentioned earlier, that's why we simply can't answer, specific questions in general, because the way you may ask a question, another person may say, oh, I have that exact same thing. It may not be apples to apples. So that's why it's important that we're looking at these on an individual basis and that we're not green-lighting a project prior to the application coming in. So as one of those documents that was linked to, I believe it was the reporting guide. That reporting guide lists out each individual expenditure category that is part of the overall categories. So I highly recommend that if you are interested in the program, you do take a look at those expenditure categories. A lot of people reference it by, 2.3 or 2.33. Those are the individual numbers that are laid out within the reporting guide. And I guarantee it can be found on one of these pages itself.
Great, thank you, Sean. So another question that we've had, which also is I think highly relevant here. Someone wrote, our nonprofit organization has already received ARPA funding through the state. Can we apply for ARPA funding from the county also? The answer is yes, so long as you're not duplicating. You're not double dipping for the same project. And Sean, again, if that needs elaboration, I would welcome your comments.
No, you are correct. So say you did get some kind of state funding, some kind of earmark from the state. Let's make up a number. If it's $100,000, if that $100,000 is specifically to be used for a specific purpose, you then can't use county funds for that exact same specific purpose because those costs are already being absorbed by that state funding. Now, if it's in addition to, then yes, Vera is absolutely correct. You can certainly use multiple ARPA funding sources to further a project or perhaps additionally fund a project. Just no double dipping.
Thank you. Kara, when you're ready with some questions from the chat, do let me know. I've got a couple more here I can use, but I will entertain one from the chat, Kara, if you have any that might be ready at this time.
Great. Thank you, Vera, and thank you, Sean. I actually do have some questions from the chat. I'll start with one from an organization that has asked if they can apply for a grant that is less than $100,000.
Excellent question. As noted earlier in this presentation, the floor for applications is $100,000. For that organization, we'd encourage you to, although perhaps you have a project idea that can be accomplished for less than $100,000, if you have the ability to scale it in such a way that other partners might be able to join you, or you might be able to provide additional services that would get you over that $100,000 floor, we would encourage you to consider that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that answer. Another question that came in that we've seen a couple times is that are faith-based groups allowed to apply?
Yes. They're, as far as I can recall, they're nonprofit organizations, and we encourage them to join the process.
That was a very quick answer. Great.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
Yeah.
That's great. Another question coming in, can the funding be used for education and training of personnel towards the goal of achieving water quality?
Good question. The answer, I guess, would be, don't mean to be an economist here, but it would depend. It would depend on how the project is framed. So I wouldn't say no. Sean, do you have anything you want to add there?
Not specifically there, because I do feel like we're getting down a specific path. So just to keep it more broad, there is that infrastructure water sewer bucket. And within there, I believe it's 18 different subcategories that talks about clean water, drinking water, or other water sewer projects. So potentially, yes, but I certainly don't want to commit to a yes or no right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the answer is perhaps.
Right. Okay, good. No, that's good. That's a great answer, because that goes back to some of the, questions regarding very specific projects. And in order to give a final answer, we need to really understand, the specific details. Thank you both for that clarification. And then we are going to move on to some additional questions. We have more coming in that have been published. That we have somebody who is asking if a nonprofit and a town agency, for example, a water commission, want to partner together on an application, will it be evident in the LOI form on how both organizations can provide their individual organizational information?
Good question. Yes, the answer is yes. We will be sure that the letter of intent structure allows for the capture or the submission of all different entities, even those that are combined in one particular LOI. Great question. Thank you.
Okay, great. Another one. You mentioned salaries must be spent by the end of 2024, but also that, in quotations, premium salaries are not a preferred expense to include. Can you provide more description of what makes something a, quote, premium salary?
Sean, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So the way the federal government wrote this up is that premium pay was a certain section. And what premium pay intended on doing was essentially, I'll call it rewarding those who were physically working during the pandemic, involved with public-facing individuals. So think, grocery store, gas station attendant, things like that nature, and providing them, I want to call it additional pay on top of what they already received as part of their normal gig, right? So that part, the county has decided not to do and not be eligible under their project, their ARPA projects. The direct recipients of their ARPA funds can further restrict what they can subaward and what they can spend on. That is perfectly legal, and that's what the county's decided to do. In terms of these regular salaries, if you will, so think about it where Barnstable County themselves, right? They hired a couple of additional FTEs, a couple of full-time equivalencies to help manage this project. So as of 12/31/24, their salaries have to be, let's say, spent. We can't obligate those funds going forward because there's no contract in place that's irrevocable saying that, John Doe will be getting paid until 12/31/26, whether he or she works at all anymore or not. So that's why as of 12/31/24, you have to spend your payroll that individual you may hire to help out or perhaps get assistance to running a program would have to be spent by that time frame. You can't carry that over into the next calendar year. Hope that helps clarify a little bit.
Yes. And I think that, like you said, there's a difference between premium pay, which is basically sort of bonus or a reward for service during the pandemic, versus a staff person in a potential project, working on that ARPA project.
Right. Think of it as administrative needs, perhaps effective service delivery, right? If you want to hire a grant manager, perhaps, depending upon what type of program this is, those salaries would be eligible, but you have until 12/31/24 for those.
Thank you. Good question.
Okay, great. Thank you both for digging into that one. We have another question, and they are asking, can one organization apply for multiple projects and programs? This is a good one.
Yes.
And I love the answers. That's a yes. So
Yes.
That's very simple. Answer is yes. Thank you, Vera. Another question, and this is around the letter of intent, the LOI. Does
that your project idea try and address as many of the selection criteria and the cross-cutting issues as possible. And I'll stop there, but it is not a formulaic thing wherein we require the LOI to go through each criterion. So we want you to express your project in a narrative form. If it's your choice to go to that level of specificity, that will be your decision, but it's certainly not a requirement.
Great, that's really helpful. Okay, I have another question, and this is about some of the different funding tranches or buckets. It says the $10 million being allocated to the individual towns. What is that money for? Will it be available to small businesses impacted by COVID for expenses, replacement of lost revenue, or to pay SBA loans?
Very good question. The $10 million allocated by the county to the towns is for specific purposes that the towns apply for. And so I'm not sidestepping the question. What I'm saying is I'm trying to give an idea of how this works. the towns are allowed to claim those funds via an application that has to fit in with, ARPA eligibility requirements. So those town applications go through the same evaluation and assessment process for eligibility that COA provides as your projects here on this call will. So the towns are applying for a specific purpose. So far, many of them have applied for large water projects. It's at the town's discretion what they use those funds for, that they apply to the county for. I will also say that the towns, and this is why we made this point earlier in the presentation, towns themselves have received direct allocations of funding from either the Treasury or through the state. So the towns have their own ARPA funding allocations and are making their own decisions about how to spend those funds. So this question is an interesting one and relevant here, but it's also equally relevant to direct it to the towns themselves. How does the town propose to expend its directly allocated money? We don't have insight into that. We're not asking the towns those questions, but the towns would be the source of information for a more fulsome answer to this question.
And Vera, I think maybe just to help summarize, at least in my mind, so that $10 million, those cities and towns within Barn County can apply for similar projects that you, a nonprofit or for-profit, may be applying to. As Vera said, maybe it's some kind of water sewer infrastructure project. Maybe it's some sort of supporting public health.
Yeah.
Those same buckets that you see, they can also be made available to those cities and towns that are applying currently.
Okay.
Thank you, Sean.
Great. Yeah, thank you both for that. We have a question from a small organization regarding financial statements. And the question is, what if our financial statements aren't audited? And it says in parentheses, as we are small enough, we don't have that requirement?
So
very good question. Sean,
it's a
go ahead.
great question. And so certainly if you don't have audited financial statements, we will need at least financial statements, right? So, and I don't want to say this is true or not, but if you are only able to provide financial statements versus audited financial statements, perhaps that makes you more high risk. That doesn't mean that the county can't award you funds. It just means that we, the county, CLA, et cetera, may just have to take additional monitoring steps to make sure that you're appropriately using the funds, make sure that you're appropriately reporting the funds. As part of our subrecipient monitoring process, maybe, again, this is all hypothetical, for some communities or some businesses, maybe we have to monitor one time a year. Maybe potentially for those who have a higher risk, maybe we monitor quarterly. Maybe we request, invoices on a quarterly basis versus doing it annually. So these are all things that internally we would have to assess as part of the overall risk level in terms of telling the county, yes, you can award these funds, or yes, we have a reasonable degree of understanding that these funds will be used in accordance with how they are awarded. Versus a business, and I'm going to make this up, I know it's not you. Yep, we don't have financials. We use a manual ledger. We don't have invoices. The whole kit and caboodle. Our last CFO, went to jail. All these crazy things, right? Clearly, that would make someone more high risk. So it's all about risk level. But great question though. So it wouldn't stop you from being able to apply it, in my mind.
Okay, great. We have a question from a foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And they are asking, can we group programs together in our initial LOI, or do you recommend focusing on one specific program?
Well, if the programs have a conceptual interrelationship that makes the project stronger, certainly group them together. Either way, whichever makes the most sense from a really good idea point of view and meets the eligibility requirements.
Okay, great. That's helpful.
Hope so. Again, without knowing more specifics, it's really hard to provide, advice, and I'm not able to advise here.
Okay. Okay, great. Another question coming in regarding timing. Do fundable projects need to have a finite beginning, middle, and end, or can they be ongoing supportive program such as a food insecurity program?
That's a very good question. I do know that I'm going to answer this to the extent that I can, and then ask Sean to step in. That for some of the town projects that we funded, for example, they have asked for funding for a discrete part of a larger project that they have approved and underway, and that funding has been approved. And so I'll answer the question in that regard. I will say also that if you look at the selection criteria, we're looking for sustainability in the project. If the project idea is already underway, has a discrete portion of it that our ARPA funding can support, and then will survive beyond ARPA, that's, that sounds like a promising idea. So it's how the project is articulated. Sean, did you want to add to that?
Just so, not in terms of, letter of intent or eligibility from that standpoint, but from an ARPA programmatic standpoint, food banks, food insecurity, sure, those are all eligible overarching ARPA projects. And I think where you're getting at is, do we need a start and end date of that project? The federal government is going to ask for a project start and end date, but clearly that can be, I don't want to say estimated, but if you do ask for $100,000 for food insecurity and you don't know when that's going to be spent, is it going to last you 1 month? Is it going to last you 5 months? We can use estimates in terms of a project start and stop date. And then as we subrecipient monitor and you fill out reporting, that's when we can utilize, is this project less than 50% complete, greater than 50% completed. So, some things aren't hard in stone dates. With some of these larger water sewer infrastructure projects, I don't know if anyone's trying to get a contractor nowadays. Good luck. So it all depends, right? You may anticipate a project starting in August this month and then finishing in December. That could get pushed out 5 months. So now that time frame becomes longer. So it is flexible in that sense.
Sean, let me ask a corollary to this question. If there's an applicant who has ongoing services that are well within what ARPA anticipates, can they apply for funding to which would just basically have ARPA funding supplant their other operational costs for running that project for a period of time?
Yeah, and so it's a great question, and I don't want to use the word supplant, because there is a single audit requirement where it's making sure that you're supplementing and not supplanting. And I don't want to get into that right now, but yes, I mean the thought process is this would be in addition to a current program, because in theory, why these ARPA funds are available is because more people need them. I know there's local food banks around me who are, clamoring for additional funds because they're used to serving, and I'm going to make up a number, 5,000 people per month. Now that's jumped to 10,000 people per month, and maybe their donations are down, their fundraising is down. So it's not supplanting, but it is supplementing their program and their initiatives right now.
Excellent, thank you. Go ahead, Kara.
Yeah. Great. The next question is one that I find is interesting because it brings up the issue of broadband, which I know is something that's important, to discuss. So the Canal Region Fiber Not-for-Profit Committee, that's who sent the question in, can funds be used for soft costs like engineering planning of a multi-town broadband network, or must it be used for hard costs like construction?
Sean, you want to take that? Because my inclination is to say yes, but I don't want to misspeak.
Yes, and this is not a final answer, right? So this is just spitballing. Typically, for a lot of your infrastructure projects, soft costs such as design, architectural, etc., are eligible. Feasibility is not, because feasibility, right? You may have an idea for a project, ultimately fund it, but then never go through with it, or get to the end of it and go, actually, this
Mhm.
isn't feasible. We're not doing it. But yes, soft costs like that, I believe, generally speaking, are eligible under ARPA, under those larger infrastructure projects, whether it's broadband, water, sewer, etc.
Thank you.
Got it. That's helpful. We have another one regarding eligibility, for geographic areas, which I think has not been asked yet, which I think is an important one to raise here. The question is, our organization provides services that also extend to towns just outside Barnstable County. Our expenditures under these grants are the, I noticed a misspelling, so I'm going to go back. Are expenditures under these grants strictly limited to the geographic area of Barnstable County?
Yeah, and Vera, I'll take this one. So
Go ahead.
yes, so whatever district is being served, so let's say it's a town, right? And the town got direct ARPA awards, they can only award within their town. Similar, the Barnstable County can only award within Barnstable County. Once they kind of cross that line, you're now walking into another direct recipient's territory, if you will. So that direct recipient should be the ones contacted if they're doing a similar program like Barnstable County. It's really intended for that direct recipient's geographic usage, if you will. So just to further belabor the point,
Yeah.
Barn County can't go awarding funds to a nonprofit in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. There's no direct correlation. It falls outside of the boundaries, if you will, of Barnstable County.
But Sean, what about to take your example, what about a project, what about an organization in Pittsfield, Massachusetts that has a branch here serving Barnstable County residents?
Well, if they're, to me, that means that that branch is part of the county and they're serving county residents or county businesses or county nonprofits. So that would be different. I don't believe, and again, 437 pages of final rule, I don't believe you can award funds outside of your area, if you will. But in the example you just gave, Vera, they actually have whether it's a physical building or they're actually serving your community, which is what these funds are intended for. So that on the surface sounds okay. Your example.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, great. That's helpful about the geography. There's been a couple of questions about geographic requirements. Another one has come in regarding the use of ARPA funds to start a new regional municipal program that does not have a clear funding stream after the ARPA money runs out.
My sense of it is that it would be allowed. We certainly would want to see, it will weigh. The likelihood of funding will turn into some extent on some vision for sustainability, but not entirely so. My sense is that would be depending on if the project idea itself is an eligible project. The answer is that application could be entertained.
Okay, great. And I find this to be an interesting one about coming from a smaller nonprofit. And I think that this is an important one because we want to make sure that we're, hearing from all different organizations that cover a number of different issues across, the entire Cape. And this question is, we are a small nonprofit, and we're hoping that a grant here could help us grow our programs and make the organization more sustainable. It sounds like this is more for established organizations.
That's a very good question. Sean, could you comment here?
I don't have a specific answer to that general question, but when I'm looking at my notes here for a second, there is something about startups. I'd have to jump around, Vera. That is a very specific question. Yeah.
We'll get back to that in the FAQs, but thank you for, it's an important question and possibly on many people's minds.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
this is actually under the assistance small business area, but there is enhanced support to what they call business incubators and startup expansion assistance. So that falls under small business. It's not under the nonprofit bucket, if you will, but you know, I don't have a yes or no, but if it's good for a small business, could it be good for a nonprofit? Potentially,
Yes.
but I don't know that off the top of my head right now.
We'll have to return to that question. Thank you for the question.
Great question.
Okay, I just want to let everybody know that we're at the 125 mark. And the conference does end at 1:30. So we'll try to do a lightning round with the additional questions that have been published here as quickly as possible to kind of power through. And again, I just want to reiterate that, you know, there'll be many opportunities to send in additional questions. There'll be an FAQ put up on the website to answer a lot of these questions. You'll be able to view the whole entire live stream again, and you will also be provided with a copy of the deck. So lightning round here. We have a question that comes very, very simply. Can you tell us, is for-profit small business, will a for-profit small business be eligible?
Will a small profit, will a for-profit small business or a non-profit small business?
For-profit.
Yeah, it depends on the idea, though. I mean, we really want to see, it's not for funding your operating expenses. It's for projects that serve the residents of the county for furtherance of the public good. So it depends.
And potentially in collaboration with another entity.
Yes.
Okay. Another one. This is regarding housing. Can we apply for housing related costs that are under $500K? For example, financial aid to help renters prevent eviction, as opposed to a multi-million-dollar construction project, which would be round 3.
Great question. Sean, do you have anything on that?
So I'll answer it in terms of ARPA eligibility.
Mhm.
There is a section for household assistance, which does talk about rental assistance, mortgage assistance, utility assistance, things of that nature. So again, generally speaking, is household assistance eligible for rental, mortgage, utility? Yes. Under the Barn County program, in terms of what they're trying to do, that's more of a you question, I guess, Vera.
Yeah.
In terms of would it satisfy some of the items you're looking for. But
Yeah.
overall, ARPA is intended for household assistance if you meet numerous criteria.
Correct. And so just from the county selection process point of view, you would have to make your judgment as to how you characterize your project in terms of the selection criteria that we've set forth.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, do the small, medium, and large categories refer to the total cost of the project or the amount being applied for?
For the amount being applied for, if I understand the question, the small and medium projects are for projects totaling $100,000 through $500,000. So $5 million has been set aside for that. We will not be entertaining projects above the $500,000 range in the small and medium project sphere.
So
I don't know if I've answered the person's question.
To that, Vera, I think where this person is coming from, because I've had similar questions from outside of Barnstable County. Let's say they want to do $1 million project, but they're going to fund 500 grand from long-term borrowing and then 500 grand from ARPA. Is when you look at your program, is it just that total overall cost or just the ARPA funded piece? That's how I'm envisioning this question.
Okay, under those circumstances, then the answer is yes. If you're funding a piece of a larger project if you're attempting to do that through this funding round, the answer is yes. You'll be asked though to articulate, to show how this particular ask of this ARPA funding round articulates with the overall project and provide documentation for that.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. So we're at 1:30 right now. We're going to take one more question, and then we can move from there. But the question is, can images, photos, and or design drawings be included in the LOI applications, which I think is an interesting one?
Why not?
Okay.
You know, if the, I don't want to be glib. I mean, if it's necessary to take up a lot of megabytes in those to store those documents online to make your point, then yes. I hadn't really considered that, but I certainly don't see any reason to exclude that at this time.
Okay, that's great. Well, I think that we're a little over time actually, and we still have quite a large volume of attendees. So we want to thank you all so much for coming today. And again, you know, we have a screen up right now that talks about the team of people that have been speaking today, and from the county additionally. So we can, these are the folks that are leading the team, just so you're aware of their names and their information. And I also, if we can, Vera, I'd like to flash one more time the screen that talks about the different places to go on our website to look at, the email address. Here's the U.S. Department of the Treasury, ARPA. We encourage people to go there to look through this, as they put together their LOIs, as a great resource. We also encourage people to, additionally, if their questions did not get asked, just because of the large volume of people that we have, hundreds of people attending, that they, go to the ARPA at barnstablecounty.org email address and send questions. Please also go to our website, capecod.gov, to see the list of FAQs, which will be informed and uploaded based on the questions that were, brought forth today by all of you attending. We also are very grateful for all of you taking the time today to participate in this session, about this really incredible opportunity for local Cape Cod communities to do some really, really great regional projects with this funding. And I want to thank all of our presenters for their detailed dialogue and the very robust Q&A that we went through. And please don't hesitate to reach out with any additional questions. And again, the deck will be available for you to peruse through, and you will be able to watch this live presentation again to go through to get any more details. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.